So let's start off with the eye. So normally we will have you put your hands on an eye model. So this is the one we have in lab. So we're learning some of the basic parts, the anatomy parts of the eye. The first one here on the front. So I guess to orient you, what we're looking at here is the nasal bone. So this is your nose, septum of your nose here. And of course they cut away part of the orbit or the eye socket. And this is the lateral, the outside of your eye. So if you're looking at your patient, we're looking at your patient's right eye. So this little sac that sits in the lacrimal bone is called the lacrimal gland. So its job is to, it's a gland, so it's going to secrete tears. Help keep your eye moist, that kind of stuff. Help get rid of debris. Then the eye has 6 different eye muscles, which are actually controlled by 3 different cranial nerves, if you guys remember from last time. Most of them are directional terms and then based on shape. So this first one here is at an angle, so it's oblique. It's not very big because it's kind of hidden where you can't see it very well. And it's on the bottom side, so it's the inferior oblique muscle. Then just to give you a couple of views here, because it's kind of hard to see, it's hidden by other ones. But this one that would run and come into the eye here, running kind of along your bone inside your nose, is the superior oblique. So it does attach to the top side of the eye here, but it's oblique because it's at an angle. It's actually got this weird kind of hooked tendon that comes around here. And then on the inside, so closest to the nose here, is the medial rectus. Oblique means at an angle, rectus means straight. And on the top here is the superior rectus muscle, straight and on the top. Then on the outside is your lateral rectus muscle. And hiding way down on the bottom is the inferior rectus muscle. So you've got 4 rectus muscles, top, bottom, and 2 sides, and then 2 obliques on top and bottom. So now coming into and sending a signal back and forth to the eye is that optic nerve, one of the cranial nerves you had to learn. And if you remember on the brain from last week, that crisscross, that X, has 2 optic nerves going one to each eye. Then the optic tracts going to the brain, and that center piece is called the optic chiasma. Then that white part of your eye is called the sclera. It's that tough kind of covering, protective covering on the eye. Then ignore the stuff below. What I'm pointing to is that clear kind of covering on the front of the eye, which is your cornea. So that protective layer allows light through because it's clear, at least in life. You'll see, of course, in death, it doesn't stay clear in the sheep eyes. So I've taken part of that piece off so you can see inside there a little better and ignore that plastic cornea on the front. So we're looking now at that opening. So the pupil is a hole. It looks like it has mass to it because it's black. Black is actually the darkness inside your eye. So it's just an opening, a hole that lets light in. So that pupil will change size. I'm sure you've seen it. We've looked at it. You get dilated or constricted pupils based on light. So that controls how much light comes into your eye, which is protective, but it also helps lights be focused either if you're looking close up or far away. And we'll talk about that on Wednesday or Thursday. Then this kind of, in the sheep, it's more of a black color. On these models, they tend to make it more brown. But there's this vascular layer, so you've got the sclera, and directly below it, because there's basically 3 layers on that part of the eye. The sclera on the outside, the middle layer is the choroid, or occasionally you see it as the choroid coat. It's that layer that houses a lot of blood vessels in it. It's also dark in color, which allows absorption of the light. And the iris is the color part of your, so on the front, you see a lot of that colored around the pupil. Of course, that color varies highly between person to person. That's a genetic something. So not everybody has the same colored iris. Then there's the cornea, and then you have your iris here. Then there's a cavity that has some fluid in it. And then next thing you have is this lens. In depth, it's harder, it's see-through, but it's basically looks like a little rock. So it's this kind of disc-shaped structure that in life it actually is flexible. So the lens, it's curved, narrower on the sides, wider in the middle, and it actually will change shape and changes the way the light comes in through the eye. Lots of physics of light and reflection. In real life, this thing that we're identifying as this kind of plastic ball is kind of jelly, gelatinous material. You've got a fluid in this jelly layer, which again helps reflect and change the way the light goes through. Then what we've done here is now we've gone and we've removed this vitreous body out of the middle, and we're looking on the deepest inside part of the eye here. So we're looking down deep inside the eye, in the most internal layer here, which is all this cream kind of tan colored layer, if you will, is called the retina. So the retina is what has all those rods and cones. So it's your visual nervous inputs. It's your receptors for taking in that light and transmitting it into a picture. Unfortunately, it's relatively thin and can be dislocated, so occasionally people will dislocate their retina, or detached retina, you'll hear it called. So ciliary body, for our purposes, we label it as this bottom part. Technically, the body includes the 2 other parts I'm going to show you here in a minute. But it has the muscles and the ligaments that actually attach and control the shape of the lens. So the white lines are those ligaments that attach to the lens. So pull and release. So they do the dirty work, and the muscles are what actually is changing this size. So your ciliary muscle is all the way up underneath these structures here. So the only way we can really see it without getting confused with the other ciliary parts is it's this kind of cross section through the side here. So now we're looking at the back side of that same piece. There's this little purple dot. Of course, in real life it's not purple. It's called the fovea centralis retinae. So it's a centralized spot on the retina, and it focuses the light. So this area is very dense in cones. So it's our highest amount of those receptors. So the light generally is focused towards that spot. So that's our best vision location, our best spot for the highest amount of visual acuity. Then on the opposite here, this circular piece here is called the optic disc. So this is what's a little piece of that optic nerve coming in here. So the optic nerve comes in and sends receptors into the eye, but unfortunately it disrupts that section. So no rods or cones are able to actually be produced there. So when you talk about having a blind spot, this is the spots as your blind spot. It's not super big, So generally doesn't cause any problem. Our body just kind of ignores it. But it's there because that optic nerve causes some interference and doesn't allow us to actually pick up any picture in that location. So that's the plastic brain. So just to show you in a more realistic version of it, we do the sheep eye. So we're looking at the front of the sheep eye here. So the white of the eye is the sclera. So these are all reviewed terms. We're just using a realistic dissection instead of a model. So the cornea, so it's this whole covering here. As you can see in death, that cornea doesn't stay opaque or see-through anymore. It starts to actually look like if you had cataracts. And then we flip to the back of the eye just to show you this. So we've got lots of fat and some remnants of the eye muscles, but the term we're asking you to know is this optic nerve back here. That's generally when we're in lab with this, it's a weird little hard nub because the tissue, the fat, the muscle is not very, it's squishy, it's not very hard, but that's really dense nervous tissue, so it's harder, but it comes directly out of the back of the eye. So that jelly sac, that vitreous humor we had, it what looks like this, yeah, like a jelly. It looks like jelly when you take it out. And then that lens here, depending on how old the sheep's eye is, changes color, but it's that little rock that in life would be stretchable. And then this is jelly, but there's also a fluid that comes out with the eye, which is called the aqueous humor, or aqueous body. So aqueous because it's water-like, vitreous because it's viscous, it's jelly-like. The aqueous humor is in the anterior cavity, or chamber, so it's between the lens and the cornea, and then behind the lens, inside, around the retina, is that vitreous body. So they're actually in two different locations, anterior and posterior chamber of the eye. So we've cut through the sheep eye, and now we're looking at the front of the eye, but the back side of it. So the iris on the other side would be brown for sheep's eyes, but it's that colored part. On the back side, it's black like everything else because it absorbs light. The pupil is that hole that lets light in. And the ciliary body. The muscle is buried underneath here. We wouldn't be able to identify that on the sheep's eye. And the ligaments generally get pulled off with the lens. So let me go back to the lens real quick. So you see all this black stuff here? That's those ciliary ligaments getting yanked off when we pull apart the eye. But they would be attached. The lens would sit here, and those ciliary ligaments would be holding it in place. So now we're looking at the back of the eye. The most internal layer. So there are multiple layers we've discussed. So the sclera is that outside layer. And the middle layer is this cream-colored retina. Inside the retina, you can see a couple different things. It's hard to see, but you see all these little creases. They're all coming into a dot. That dot is that optic disc. Because it yanks on the retina, it kind of creates these folds and makes a little indent. And the folds have their own names, which are the retinal folds. So now what we've done is we've taken the retina here and we've carefully folded it back so you can look at what's in this middle layer here. So this kind of shiny, it's sometimes silver or sometimes blue, depending on the age of the sheep's eye. It's called the tapetum lucidum. We as humans do not have that. That is a specialized structure for animals that are nocturnal and can see at night. So this layer here reflects the light through the retina multiple times. The more times the light passes through the retina, the more that's absorbed, and the more they can see in low light. So we don't have that layer. You saw it, our inside of our layer is just kind of that blacky brown color. And then that choroid layer is also there, but it has the tapetum lucidum with it. And then the retina is just folded back. So that is the eye. So the easiest way was just to give you a brief physiology on this, but we will go into more detail, not as thorough as lecture would normally do, but enough to give you a nice brief overview of how vision works at the end of this week. Excuse me, and you've got some handouts to fill out to go along with that. Okay, so I am terrified that my computer's crashed again, so I'm going to get out of this and make sure that I am still okay. I cannot see if my computer's crashed when I'm on PowerPoint, so let's go back again. So now hearing, that goes of course with the ear. So this is our ear model. We're looking at the external part of the ear. So this is your auricle or pinna, the outside of your ear here. So this would be lateral, and this is medial. So this is the inside of the ear. Remember that that's that mastoid process, your ear, the hearing part of your ear is hiding inside that. So this bone around here is part of that temporal bone and the mastoid process. So the outside of the ear, you can either call the auricle or the pinna. Then remember on the skull, we had that hole that was going into the ear cavity, which is the external auditory or acoustic meatus. So you'll hear them talk about the middle ear. That's the section that has those little ear bones in it. So sound comes through your external auditory meatus here, and it smacks into this tympanic membrane. If you shove a Q-tip too far down in there and you rupture your, quote, eardrum, it's the tympanic membrane, but please call it tympanic membrane and not eardrum. It gets its name eardrum is because the sound pounds on that like a drum. Then inside the ear you have 3 ear bones, which are called the auditory ossicles. So when we were doing the bones, this is part of the 6 additional bones, just we leave it for hearing because they're specialized. So they each have their own name, of course. So the malleus, it gets its name because it looks like a mallet. It's hammer-shaped. Then the incus looks like an anvil. Anvil is that hard metal thing that metal workers pound on, and in a lot of cartoons is what they drop on people to try to, or animals to try to kill them. It's that metal kind of triangle shaped, flat on the top, and it's got a weird kind of base to it. So remember, these things were named a long time ago. We don't use anvils very much unless you go to some place where they still do metalworking, but it gives you an idea of why they called it that. And the stapes translate in the fact that it's stirrup-shaped, so somebody thought it looks like a horse's stirrup where you put your foot in. And it does have a hole in the middle, which vaguely looks like a stirrup. So just quickly, so the sound comes in here, vibrates on this tympanic membrane, sends the vibration through the malleus, the incus, onto the stapes here, and then the stapes will send the signal into the rest of this inner ear, which we'll talk about now. So going down the other way here, you have either your auditory or your eustachian tube. Whoops, I was not supposed to give you auditory. I don't want you to know it as auditory. I forgot to fix that. You'll look at your handout. It has to do with the fact that it goes to the pharynx, and eustachian is just the one that most of us are more familiar with. So no auditory tube, that's not descriptive enough. I apologize, that's not on your handout, so the correct terms are on your handout. So the internal ear, so middle ear, external ear, sounds coming in, so this is the deepest part here. So I've pulled that piece so I've taken that piece out of the bone so we can see it a little easier. So remember, this is the stapes here. So it's coming in and sending pressure waves through here. So this snail shell looking one, or shell because of the twisted appearance to it, is called the cochlea. I think most of us have heard of cochleas, especially if you've known anybody that had to get a cochlea implant. So we'll see what's inside that when we get to the actual microscope slide. But on this view, this model, it's very difficult to see any internal characteristics on this. But we'll talk about the cochlea in a minute. So there are a couple openings that let pressure waves in and back out again. So unfortunately, there's no good way to remove the stapes to see this, but there is a cavity underneath the stapes, an opening, which is called the oval window because it's oval shaped, and the stapes pushes through that opening. And then the round window is on the base of it. So we'll talk about this with sound, but again, the pressure waves come in and that helps relieve the pressure on the round window. And the middle parts where the sound is getting transferred through is just called the vestibule. So we have 3 semicircular canals in our ear. We have the anterior one. Sometimes it will be called something besides anterior, but we're going to go by what OpenStax and most of the books now call it. It is more to the front than the other ones, but it used to also be called the medial because it's a little more to the middle and to the front. But it's the direction that it's facing. So this one they think is facing more anterior. For this one on the back, which makes sense, is more in the posterior plane. And then the third one is, so remember our pinna is over here. So this is the outside of our ear. It's the lateral semicircular canal. I think you can get how they named it semicircular because it's loopy, but it's not a complete circle. It's only part of one. Each of those senses a different plane in your body. So we'll talk about this more on Wednesday and Thursday. But as you tilt your head left to right, front and back, these 3 semicircular canals are detecting that motion to keep your balance and help orient you. And unfortunately, the third one is hiding in the back here. You can see just a little piece of it here. There was no view I could do where I could actually see 3 of them at the same time, but at the base of each of these semicircular canals is there a piece that kind of bulges out, which is called the ampulla. There are some specialized structures housed within there, and the rest of it has a canal or fluid that runs through the middle of it. So looking at the whole ear here again, what we're trying to show you is this nerve that sticks out the back. So together, remember, with one of the cranial nerves, it's vestibular cochlear nerve, but it has 2 pieces that go to the 2 main different parts of the ear, which remember is why I didn't want you to call it auditory. So the piece that attaches to the semicircular canals and the vestibule, so the vestibular nerve here, is the one that is helping with your balance, versus the cochlear nerve goes to the cochlea, and that's what where hearing is. So remember that this inner ear both helps with balance and posture, but also, of course, takes in sound and translates it to our brain. Okay, so this won't take very long, and I haven't taken attendance yet, so let me take attendance really quickly here, please. One more double check to make sure I am still connected. So if you will go into the box and put here, please. Okay, so my internet connection still claims that I'm with it. So let's finish up here and do the cochlea slide. So remember I talked about the fact that you couldn't see very nicely inside the cochlea here, but there is tunnels on the inside. So the easiest way to see that is you have to look at a slide. So this is a cross section through that part of the ear, which I guess I probably should have put this picture first. So what we're doing is inside the cochlea here, you have all these little cavities, little tunnels. So fluid goes through there. And you can see the nerves are attached to it. So what we're doing is we're doing a cross section and we're looking at these cavities, this internal part here. So there are three main kind of pathways for that fluid inside the ear. You have your scala vestibuli. So scala basically is cavity, and this is the part that's attached to the vestibule. And then you have your vestibular membrane, which divides that from the cochlear duct, which also could be called the scala media. Most people will call it cochlear duct, but to go along with the scalas, it still is media or middle. Then your third one is your scala tympani, because this goes towards the tympanic side versus the vestibule side. So now inside here is this specialized structure, which is called the spiral organ or organ of Corti. So in there it has a tectoral membrane, so that little membrane will vibrate, bounce up and down. It has these hair cells, which detect the motion of that fluid going through there. And then there's a base membrane, which is the basilar membrane. So we will go into a little more detail in this when we try to pull up stuff for Wednesday and Thursday and try to see if I can find some videos that help with that. There's a few of them on vestibular visual body, which will go along with those handouts you would do. But I also will see if I can pull up a couple other videos. Chances are it's going to be crash course because I like crash course videos. So know these parts will help try to piece together the ear, the eye, and the inside cochlea slide on Wednesday and Thursday to try to make these little parts make more sense in their functions. So here is just trying to show you this is where the section is, but specifically that spiral organ is this little space in here that has all those kind of receptors. And that is ear and eye. So smaller amount of material than some of the other stuff. You've got repeats because you have a sheep eye and a plastic model eye to do. So shouldn't hopefully be too bad. All things considered, it's simpler material than, of course, the brain is. So remember, you've got a Quizlet that's due tomorrow night. And then you can always, of course, start working on the visible body quiz that's due Friday. And the tagging for visible body that's due Friday. I'll re-mention that on Wednesday and Thursday. Let me pull up visible body just in case you have trouble. Because visible body, I added the directions, but sometimes it's a little harder because it's not what you normally see on the views. You have to go to microanatomy, so let me hurry and pull up visible body here. Are there any questions why I'm hurrying and trying to do that? I probably should have pulled it up ahead of time, but you know that silly app takes a while to load up. So if you have any other questions, let me know while I'm waiting for that app to load up. I have not gone through and regraded the quizzes from yesterday because they were due at midnight. I don't get up that early to work on that stuff. So I will work on regrading those today. Then I have to work on the osteoporosis handouts. Those handouts, when I've got a bunch of other things to work on, get pushed because it's more important to build content and unfortunately it is to grade those. But everything else should be graded. I went through and did all the tagging stuff, unless I missed some. So the only thing that should not be graded yet is that osteoporosis muscle action handout, just because that takes a while. And I will be working on that, starting on that at least today. So you're almost up to date. Regrade the quizzes from yesterday and finish that handout, and then the points, what point totals are correct, so you know where your grade's at. It's loading. It's loading. We're getting there. Here, let me go back and try to share it while it's loading. So just remember that views, it should always be on. The rest of this stuff is good if it's something you want to do, but it's not necessarily something that I will ever send you to. But normally we're doing the systems one. But the systems doesn't do hearing. It does the bones, but it doesn't do the smaller anatomy. So you have to go and keep going and work on something called microanatomy. And you can see in the microanatomy, you've got the ears and the eye ones. And I asked you guys to use 2 lacrimal apparatus for the eye tagging. And then come in here and do the inner ear. I can't remember his middle or inner ear. So at least you know where it is and you can read it on the handouts. One of these two, either inner or middle ear for the ear structures. So please use those views. As always with the tagging, I'm having trouble with people being super far zoomed out and at a weird angle where I really can't see half of your tags. And for the most part, I've been giving credits, but I've gotten picky, and actually some people have gotten marked down if they're not following directions and using the correct view. And those two are there's 2 pictures you're going to have to tag. I probably should have got you to also tag the cochlea, but that would be 3 pictures. That's a little much for one 5-point activity. But please realize that if you want to have a nice view of the cochlea to practice with, this is where it's located at. There's not a ton of stuff in here, so you could do this really fast. I'm not making you tag it, but it is something that you're required to know for that visible body quiz. So just be familiar with where that's located. Any questions on that? Is everybody okay? We're almost done. The handouts for visible body that we're working on, quote, working on Wednesday and Thursday are up. So if you've got time, they're going to take an hour or so a piece to complete, to fill in. So if you've got the time, feel free by all means to go start working on those. Otherwise, I'll go through in more detail and explain that on Wednesday and Thursday, depending on which day you attend. Any other questions? Is everybody okay? I hope everybody had a good weekend, and we're plugging and chugging through this material now. So we just have to get her done. Well, if you guys are good, I'm going to stop recording here.
Miss S, I have a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Carla.
The Quizlet that we have due tomorrow, that's the last Quizlet, right?
It is the last Quizlet, correct.
Okay.
We're finishing,
I just wanted to
yeah, we're finishing up our Quizlets. The Quizlet tomorrow is the last one. Then the rest of our visible body stuff is due on Friday, and then our last Blackboard quiz is on Saturday or Sunday. And then next week we don't have any new material. We're just reviewing for the final exam, and then the final exam is on Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
So just to keep an itemize of what's due before the final exam, we've got a vision and hearing handout, 10 points apiece. The 5-point for the Quizlet that's due tomorrow. We've got the visual body tagging and the visible body quiz on the ear, hearing, cochlea, which are due Friday, and then 1 Blackboard quiz, which is due on Sunday. So because we have the handouts, we have a little less quizzes, but the handouts will take time. It also means that our meetup on Wednesday and Thursday will probably be a whole whopping 15 minutes, play a couple videos and show you where it is on visible body, and just send you off to work on those handouts. So we're plugging and chugging. Remember, everything is posted. Even the ear, eye, cochlea quiz that's due on Sunday is active. I posted it, and I have to remember if you can see it. I'm pretty sure you can. So it's there and ready for you to go. So anything that's due between now and Sunday is available. So feel free to work ahead. I know for many people that's not something you want to do, but for those that would like to get it done and over with so they can start studying for the final or other courses finals, get it done. It's there, it's available. Take it whenever you want. Everything is up and ready.